The sprawling Hawthorne mansion loomed over the Millers with an almost palpable air of age and mystery. Its grand, though slightly weathered facade spoke of bygone eras and whispered secrets long buried beneath the weight of time. The mansion had been vacant for years, its once vibrant colors now faded into a palette of somber grays and muted brown. As Sarah Miller guided the moving truck up the cracked driveway, the house seemed to watch with hollow eyes from its dusty windows. The mansion, with its elaborate gables and tangled ivy, cast long shadows in the late afternoon light, adding to its enigmatic allure. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the smell of old wood and mildew. The echo of footsteps reverberated through the cavernous hallways as the family began the daunting task of unpacking. Each room revealed relics of its storied past, intricate moldings, creaking floors, and chandeliers cloaked in cobwebs. The air was heavy, carrying with it the weight of countless unspoken histories. In the basement, where the darkness seemed to cling more persistently, Sarah stumbled upon something peculiar. Behind a stack of old shelves and dust-laden boxes, she discovered a door that was partially hidden from view. It was an old wooden door, its surface marred by age and neglect, with rusted hinges that had long ceased to function smoothly. It seemed to beckon with a silent, almost defiant allure, concealed and forgotten. Curiosity piqued. Sarah managed to pry open the door with a mix of determination and apprehension. The hinges groaned in protest, releasing a wave of stale air and revealing a hidden room cloaked in shadows. The room, though filled with dust and the remnants of forgotten possessions, held an air of quiet sadness. Among the scattered relics and old furniture, an ornate chest stood out, its surface adorned with intricate carvings that hinted at secrets long hidden. As the family continued their unpacking and settling in, the mansion's silence was punctuated only by the occasional creak and groan of its ancient timbers. Yet the hidden room, discovered in the depths of the basement, held a certain foreboding promise. It was as if the mansion itself had been waiting, holding its breath, for someone to uncover the mysteries it had long kept sealed away. The door, long forsaken by time, creaked open with a hesitant groan, revealing a room enveloped in a thick layer of dust. The air, musty and stagnant, seemed to exhale a sigh of forgotten memories. The faint light from Sarah's flashlight cast long shadows across the room, illuminating the forgotten treasures and casting an eerie glow over the scene. The room was a time capsule from another era. Vintage furniture, its once grand upholstery now faded and tattered, stood solemnly in the dim light. An old rocking chair, its wood scratched and worn, faced an empty cobweb-covered fireplace. Stacked in a corner were wooden toys, their colors dulled by the relentless march of time. Each item, though mundane in its own right, seemed to exude a quiet melancholy. In the center of the room, partially obscured by a heavy dust cover, was a large, ornate chest. Its surface was intricately carved with delicate patterns, but the beauty of the craftsmanship was marred by the thick layer of dust that coated it. The chest, as if guarding its secrets, seemed to have remained untouched for decades. With a mixture of reverence and curiosity, Sarah and David approached the chest. The hinges protested with a groan as they pried it open, revealing its contents. Inside lay an assortment of old garments and faded photographs, all carefully preserved despite their age. Amidst these items, one object stood out, a leather-bound diary, its cover embossed with the name Eliza Whitaker. The diary, though worn with age, was surprisingly intact. The leather cover, though cracked and faded, bore an inscription that marked it as a cherished possession. Sarah carefully picked it up, her fingers brushing against the delicate leather. She could feel the weight of the past pressing against the pages as she opened it. The first few pages were filled with neat, looping script, ink a deep brown that had resisted the ravages of time. The diary belonged to Eliza Whitaker, a young girl whose life was detailed with a blend of innocence and a creeping sense of unease. The entries spoke of daily activities, family gatherings, and the slow encroachment of a growing sadness. As Sarah and David examined the diary, the sense of mystery deepened. The name, Eliza Whitaker, was now more than just a name on a page. It was a link to a young life that had been lost to time. The discovery of the diary was more than a mere finding. It was the beginning of an unraveling story, one that would soon intertwine with their own lives in ways they had yet to understand. That night, the Hawthorne mansion lay shrouded in a blanket of darkness, save for the flickering glow of a single candle casting shadows upon the walls. Sarah, her curiosity piqued and her mind restless, settled into a quiet corner of the living room. The leather-bound diary, now a tangible link to the past, lay open before her. As Sarah turned the fragile pages, she was transported to a world of a bygone era. The entries, penned in a delicate hand, recounted the everyday life of Eliza Whitaker. Her words painted a picture of a young girl's world, full of innocent joys and mundane details, family meals, games in the garden, and the simple pleasures of childhood. But as Sarah delved deeper, a shift became apparent. The entries began to darken, reflecting a growing sense of unease. Eliza wrote of strange occurrences within the mansion, doors that creaked open on their own, whispers that seemed to float through the hallways, and shadows that moved with a will of their own. Her words, once filled with youthful enthusiasm, now betrayed a creeping fear. Each entry detailed a deepening isolation. Eliza described how her once familiar home had become a place of dread, where every noise seemed amplified and every shadow held an ominous presence. Her writings became erratic, with sentences that trailed off and words that seemed to mirror her escalating anxiety. The final entry was a stark contrast to the previous pages. It began with a hurried scrawl, almost as if Eliza had been writing in a state of panic. The words spoke of a pressing urgency, feeling that something dreadful was imminent. There was mention of a hidden room, one that was part of the mansion but never seen before, and a sense of being watched, followed by an inexplicable dread that had consumed her. The entry ended abruptly, with the ink still fresh and the pen seemingly dropped mid-sentence. There was no concluding remark, no final sentence to provide closure. It was as if Eliza's last moments were captured in those unfinished words, a chilling testament to her sudden and mysterious disappearance. As Sarah closed the diary, the weight of its secrets pressed heavily upon her. The sudden cutoff of the final entry left an unsettling void, hinting at a darkness that had claimed Eliza's life. The mansion, with its creaking floors and whispering shadows, seemed to echo the silent cry for help that had been captured within the pages of the diary. The discovery had not only unveiled the story of a lost girl, but had also stirred the air with an uneasy sense of impending revelation. The Millers had hoped that settling into the Hawthorne mansion would bring them a sense of new beginnings, but instead, their days became increasingly punctuated by unsettling events. The grand old house, with its creaking floors and shadowed corners, seemed to harbor more than just echoes of the past. Emily was the first to feel the presence of something out of the ordinary. At night, her once peaceful slumber was frequently interrupted by faint whispers that seemed to drift through her room, soft and unintelligible. Shadows moved with an uncanny fluidity across her walls, slipping out of sight whenever she tried to focus on them. The sight of a fleeting figure, a girl in old-fashioned attire, haunted her peripheral vision, leaving her with a sense of being watched. Sarah, meanwhile, began to notice that her belongings were inexplicably rearranged. Items on her dresser were found in different places than where she had left them, and drawers would be open when she was certain she had closed them. Her once orderly kitchen now had dishes in disarray, and the feeling of being scrutinized weighed heavily on her shoulders. Despite her attempts to rationalize these disturbances, an undercurrent of unease settled in her mind. David, attempting to dismiss the disturbances as mere quirks of the old house, encountered phenomena that defied simple explanation. On several occasions, he would walk through certain rooms only to be hit by sudden chilling gusts of cold air. The temperature fluctuations were disorienting. A room that was warm moments earlier would plunge into an icy cold without warning. Each cold spot seemed to linger, as though the house itself was holding on to some long-forgotten chill. The once silent and somber mansion had begun to hum with a life of its own. The Millers' initial excitement about their new home gave way to a growing sense of dread as they each experienced the house's haunting manifestations in their own ways. The shadows in Emily's room, the inexplicable rearrangements of Sarah's belongings, and the sudden cold spots David felt were all part of a greater mystery, one that seemed to be reaching out from the depths of the mansion's hidden past. Despite their attempts to ignore or rationalize the occurrences, family couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion was alive with a presence from the past, one that was growing increasingly restless. The disturbances became a constant reminder that the house held secrets, and those secrets were beginning to stir, drawing the Millers into a web of ghostly encounters that demanded their attention. The mansion, with its endless corridors and shadowy corners, seemed to breathe with a life of its own, particularly in the dead of night. Emily's dreams were increasingly plagued by unsettling visions, as if the mansion's ghosts had begun to weave themselves into the fabric of her subconscious. One night, Emily's sleep was disturbed by a particularly vivid dream. She found herself wandering through a dimly lit hallway, its walls lined with faded portraits and dusty old frames. The air was heavy with a palpable sense of sorrow and fear. At the end of the hall stood a young girl in vintage clothing, her dress a delicate shade of blue, tattered at the edges. Her hair, dark and wavy, fell around her shoulders like a cascade of night. The girl's eyes were wide and filled with an otherworldly sadness as she extended a trembling hand towards Emily. The figure's silent plea was clear, even though no words were spoken. The girl's eyes conveyed a desperate need for help, a cry for assistance that transcended the boundaries of the dream world. Emily reached out instinctively, but the moment her fingers were about to touch the girl's hand, she was jolted awake, her heart racing and her sheets tangled around her. The first light of dawn filtered through her window as Emily's eyes adjusted to the room's familiar surroundings. To her shock and dismay, she noticed a crumpled note lying on the floor near her bed. The note was written in a shaky, uneven hand, the ink smudged and barely legible. It read, "Help me." The writing was unfamiliar, yet its urgency was unmistakable. Emily's mind raced with the implications of the note. It was a direct plea for help, and the eerie coincidence of the note appearing after her dream of Eliza's ghost was too strong to ignore. Despite her parents' growing skepticism and their attempts to rationalize the disturbances as mere figments of imagination or the quirks of an old house, Emily felt an irresistible pull towards the mystery. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily resolved to investigate further. She began exploring the mansion with renewed focus, paying closer attention to the hidden corners and overlooked details that might hold the key to understanding the ghostly presence that had reached out to her. Her search was driven by the need to unravel the secrets that had become intertwined with her own experiences, and to find a way to offer the help that Eliza's ghost so desperately sought. The mansion, with its labyrinthine passages and long-forgotten secrets, seemed to both beckon and resist her efforts. Yet Emily's resolve remained unshaken as she ventured deeper into the mansion's haunted past, guided by the eerie visions and the cryptic note that had become her beacon in the growing darkness. Determined to uncover the truth behind the haunting presence she had encountered, Emily ventured to the local library, a stately building that seemed to hold within its walls the whispers of many forgotten stories. The library's atmosphere was quiet and contemplative, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the mansion. Emily felt a sense of purpose as she approached the old wooden shelves lined with dusty volumes and yellowing newspapers. With meticulous care, she delved into the archives, searching for any information related to Eliza Whittaker and the Hawthorne mansion. The library's staff, though initially skeptical of Emily's quest, pointed her towards local history records and old newspaper clippings that might shed light on the mysterious past of her new home. Her research led her to a collection of old newspapers from over a century ago. One article, dated from a stormy night in the late 1800s, detailed a dramatic disappearance that had captivated the town's attention. The headline read, "Young girl vanishes during storm, mansion's owners missing." The article recounted how Eliza Whittaker, a beloved young girl, had vanished without a trace on a night marked by a ferocious storm. Her disappearance was a source of intense speculation and fear. The mansion's owners at that time, identified as the Whittaker family, were also reported missing. The circumstances surrounding their disappearance were shrouded in mystery. The article noted that the mansion had been found abandoned, with signs of a hasty departure. There were no clues to explain the family's fate, and the mansion's state suggested that something catastrophic had occurred. Further investigation revealed that the town had long considered the mansion cursed. Over the years, various owners had reported strange occurrences and unsettling phenomena. The mansion's reputation grew as a place of misfortune, with tales of inexplicable noises and ghostly apparitions spreading among the townspeople. Despite numerous attempts to understand the events, the case remained unresolved, leaving the mansion to be viewed with a mix of fear and fascination. The more Emily uncovered, the clearer it became that Eliza's disappearance was a critical piece of a larger, unresolved puzzle. The mansion, with its eerie manifestations and cryptic diary, was now seen in a new light. It was not just an old house, but a place tied to a tragic history. A history that had been waiting, hidden in shadows and whispers, for someone to bring its secrets into the light. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Emily felt a renewed urgency to unravel the mansion's mysteries. The chilling accounts of Eliza's last moments and the mansion's curse intertwined with her own experiences, driving her to dig deeper. The more she learned, the more the mansion's ghostly presence seemed to reach out, imploring her to solve the enigma and bring an end to the haunting legacy that had endured for so long. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the Hawthorne mansion grew more charged with a palpable sense of unrest. The family, now deeply intrigued by the mansion's haunting presence and the mystery of Eliza Whittaker, found themselves increasingly drawn into the supernatural disturbances that seemed to escalate with each passing night. Sarah, whose initial skepticism had given way to a cautious curiosity, began to experience unsettling occurrences of her own. It started with a series of cryptic messages that appeared in her handwriting. At first, the notes were simple, with phrases like, "Help me," and "Find the truth," scrawled in her script, though she was certain she had not written them. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, yet the messages conveyed a sense of urgency and desperation that seemed to come from a source beyond her comprehension. The notes appeared in various places, tucked inside her books, left on the kitchen counter, even under her pillow. Each message seemed to grow more frantic, urging her to uncover the truth and resolve the lingering tragedy that had settled over the mansion. The handwriting remained consistent, but the tone of the messages grew increasingly distressed, as if the writer was reaching out for solace from a tormented past. Meanwhile, David, who had taken on the task of exploring the hidden compartments of the chest they had discovered, stumbled upon a crucial clue. While sifting through the old garments and faded photographs, he discovered a hidden compartment in the chest's base. Inside, he found an old photograph of a young girl, the very likeness of Eliza Whittaker, as well as a man whose face was partially obscured by shadows. The photograph was yellowed with age, its edges curling slightly as if resisting the passage of time. The man in the photograph was dressed in period clothing, his expression stern and somewhat aloof. The contrast between Eliza's youthful innocence and the man's inscrutable demeanor suggested a relationship fraught with tension or secrecy. The discovery of the photograph added a new layer to the mystery. Who was this man, and what role did he play in Eliza's life? The photograph seemed to be a silent witness to a past event that had left an indelible mark on the mansion's history. The fact that the man was associated with Eliza's image hinted at a connection that needed to be unraveled. As the paranormal activity intensified and the family continued to piece together the fragments of the past, the mansion's atmosphere became more charged with the weight of its unresolved history. The ghostly messages in Sarah's handwriting and the photograph of the mysterious man were both urgent calls for attention, guiding the family toward the deeper truths that lay hidden in the shadows of the Hawthorne mansion. Each new clue, each message and photograph, served to draw the family closer to understanding the full scope of the tragedy that had unfolded within the mansion's walls. The ghostly presence, once a vague and unsettling force, was now becoming a tangible part of their lives, demanding resolution, that offering glimpses into a haunting past could no longer remain buried. As Emily delved deeper into her research, her discoveries began to weave together a disturbing narrative that painted a clearer picture of Eliza Whittaker's tragic fate. The local archives, old letters, and town records slowly revealed the dark undercurrents that had led to Eliza's disappearance. One particularly revealing document, was a personal letter from the Whitaker family's former housekeeper, found among the town's historical records. The letter described the atmosphere in the mansion leading up to Eliza's disappearance. It spoke of mounting tensions within the household, particularly between Eliza and a man who was once considered a close family friend. This man, identified as Charles, had been a frequent visitor to the mansion and was well regarded by the family. His sudden and inexplicable departure coincided with the onset of Eliza's strange behavior and eventual disappearance. The letter also hinted at a significant betrayal. Eliza had trusted Charles deeply, believing him to be a confidant. However, as the letter revealed, Charles had begun to act suspiciously, and his relationship with Eliza had taken a troubling turn. He was believed to have been involved in a scheme that sought to exploit or control her, leading to a significant breach of trust. Emily's investigation further uncovered that Eliza had been locked away in the hidden room as a form of punishment or to silence her. The diary entries she had read hinted at Eliza's awareness of being watched and her growing fear of being confined. The final, unfinished diary entry, which spoke of a hidden room and an impending dread, suggested that Eliza had been aware of her grim fate as it approached. The hidden room, initially discovered by Sarah and David, was now understood to be more than just a forgotten space. It was a prison where Eliza was reportedly confined, pleas for help unheeded. The suddenness of her disappearance, coupled with the evidence of confinement, indicated that she had been trapped and left to die in isolation. The connection between the man in the photograph and the betrayal was now undeniable. Charles, whose face was partially obscured in the photograph, had been a key figure in the events leading up to Eliza's tragic end. The photograph, along with the housekeeper's letter, painted a picture of a man who had used his influence to orchestrate Eliza's imprisonment. The more Emily learned, the clearer it became that Eliza's fate had been sealed by a combination of betrayal and confinement. The haunting presence in the mansion was not just a restless spirit, but a soul trapped in the remnants of her unresolved tragedy. The ghostly messages, the hidden room, and the photograph all pointed to a past marred by deceit and sorrow. With this understanding, Emily knew that resolving the mystery required more than just uncovering the truth. It demanded an acknowledgement of Eliza's suffering and a means to offer the peace that had been denied for so long. The mansion's ghosts were not just remnants of a dark past, but echoes of a story that needed to be told and put to rest. The decision to hold a séance was not made lightly. The Millers, driven by a mix of determination and desperation, prepared for what they hoped would be the culmination of their investigation. The séance would take place in the hidden room, now understood to be the site of Eliza Whitaker's confinement and ultimate fate. They arranged candles in a circle, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls, and placed a small table at the room's center, covered with objects intended to facilitate communication with the spirit world. As the evening settled and the storm clouds gathered outside, the room's atmosphere became heavy with anticipation and unease. Emily, Sarah, and David gathered in the center of the room, their faces illuminated by the soft, trembling light of the candles. The air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding seemed to envelop them. They began the séance with a solemn intent, invoking Eliza's spirit with respectful words and a request for communication. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of the wind outside, its mournful whistling seeping through the cracks in the old walls. The candles flickered violently as if responding to an unseen presence. As the séance progressed, the room's temperature dropped even further, and a dense, oppressive feeling settled over the family. Suddenly, a chill ran through the room, and the flickering candles cast an eerie, shifting light. Eliza's ghostly figure began to materialize before them, her form faint and ethereal but unmistakably sorrowful. Her eyes, filled with a deep, melancholic sadness, seemed to reach out with a desperate longing. The ghostly apparition of Eliza appeared more clearly as the séance continued. Her presence was marked by a sense of profound sadness and the remnants of her once hopeful spirit. The temperature continued to plummet, and the room was filled with the sound of soft, disembodied whispers that seemed to carry Eliza's anguished pleas. Through chilling messages and spectral manifestations, Eliza's ghost conveyed her story in a manner that transcended words. The room seemed to come alive with ghostly activity. Objects moved on their own, and the walls echoed with the faint cries of the past. Eliza's ghostly form, while silent, conveyed through her gestures and the intensity of her presence the identity of her betrayer. In a moment of intense revelation, a spectral image appeared, a shadowy figure that closely resembled the man in the photograph. Charles, the man who had once been a friend but turned out to be her betrayer, was revealed as the architect of Eliza's tragic fate. His image loomed large, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of Eliza's sorrowful form. The ghost of Eliza, through her manifestations and the intensity of her presence, implored the Millers to reveal the truth about her fate. The message was clear. Her story needed to be told, and justice needed to be served for the wrongs she had suffered. As the séance drew to a close, Eliza's apparition slowly faded, her presence lingering in the room with a lingering, wistful sadness. The room's temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive feeling lifted, though the sense of purpose remained. The Millers, deeply moved and shaken by the experience, understood that their mission was far from over. They had communicated with Eliza's spirit and uncovered the truth. The task now was to ensure that her story was brought to light, honoring her memory and providing the closure that had been denied for so long. With the harrowing revelations of the séance fresh in their minds, the Millers set about the task of piecing together Eliza Whitaker's story and exposing the truth of tragic fate. Armed with the knowledge gathered from the diary, the hidden room, photograph, and the séance, they knew their mission was to ensure that Eliza's suffering was acknowledged and that her story was brought to the light. Emily, Sarah, and David collaborated to compile their findings into a comprehensive account of Eliza's life and the betrayal that led to her disappearance. They meticulously documented the events, from Eliza's joyful beginnings to the dark betrayal by Charles and her subsequent confinement. The family reached out to local historians and journalists, providing them with evidence and urging them to publish the true account of what had transpired in the mansion. The story of Eliza Whitaker, once a shadowy mystery, began to unfold in the town's newspapers and historical journals. The articles detailed the betrayal, the confinement, and the tragic fate that had been hidden for so long. The revelations sparked a renewed interest in the mansion's history and a sense of collective responsibility to honor Eliza's memory. The town's response was one of shock and empathy. Community members, moved by the tragic story, rallied to support the Millers' efforts. Donations were made to restore and preserve the mansion, and the hidden room was transformed into a memorial dedicated to Eliza. The memorial included photographs, excerpts from her diary, and an account of the events that had led to her untimely death. As the truth about Eliza's fate was made public and her memory was honored, the haunting manifestations in the mansion ceased. The oppressive atmosphere that had once pervaded the rooms lifted, and the cold spots, whispers, and shadowy figures disappeared. It was as though the acknowledgement of Eliza's suffering and the restoration of the hidden room had brought a sense of closure to her restless spirit. The Millers, though forever changed by their experience, found a sense of peace in knowing that they had helped to uncover the truth and bring justice to a long-forgotten tragedy. The mansion, now a place of remembrance rather than fear, stood as a testament to Eliza's life and the enduring impact of her story. The hidden room, once a symbol of confinement and sorrow, was now a space of reverence and reflection. The family's dedication to preserving Eliza's memory ensured that her story would be remembered, and the mansion became a place where visitors could pay their respects and learn about the haunting history that had once shrouded it. As time went on, the Millers continued to care for the mansion and its memorial to Eliza. The experience had profoundly affected them, leaving them with a deep respect for the past and a renewed sense of the importance of truth and remembrance. In honoring Eliza's memory, they had brought closure to a century-old mystery, and in doing so, had found their own path to healing and understanding.